World War I was one of the first truly global conflicts in history. It began in 1914 and lasted until 1918, involving many of the world's major powers. The war changed the political landscape of Europe and had lasting consequences for the entire world. Before the war, Europe was divided into powerful alliances. On one side were the Allies, including Britain, France, and Russia. On the other side were the Central Powers, mainly Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. These alliances were meant to provide security, but they also increased tensions. Nationalism was one of the main causes of the war. Many countries were proud of their strength and wanted to expand their influence. At the same time, some ethnic groups wanted independence from large empires, especially in regions like the Balkans. Another major factor was militarism. European countries were building large armies and developing new weapons. There was a belief that war could be a way to solve problems quickly and prove national strength. The immediate cause of the war was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in June 1914. He was killed in Sarajevo by a nationalist. This event triggered a chain reaction of declarations of war between the alliances. Once the war began, it spread rapidly across Europe. Germany invaded Belgium and France, leading Britain to join the war. Soon, countries from around the world were involved. One of the defining features of World War I was trench warfare. Soldiers dug deep trenches to protect themselves from enemy fire. These trenches stretched for miles, especially on the Western Front. Conditions in the trenches were terrible: mud, disease, and constant danger. The war also introduced new and deadly technologies. Machine guns, tanks, poison gas, and airplanes were used on a large scale for the first time. These weapons made the war more destructive than any conflict before it. Despite the heavy fighting, progress was often very slow. Battles could last for months with little change in territory. Millions of soldiers were killed or wounded in these long and brutal engagements. One of the turning points of the war was the entry of the United States in 1917. The U.S. joined the Allies, providing fresh troops and resources. This gave the Allies a significant advantage. At the same time, Russia withdrew from the war due to internal problems and revolution. This allowed Germany to focus more on the Western Front, but it was not enough to secure victory. By 1918, the Central Powers were weakening. Germany launched a final offensive but failed. The Allies then pushed forward, forcing Germany to seek peace. The war ended on November 11, 1918, when an armistice was signed. However, the consequences of the war were far-reaching. Millions of people had died, and many countries were left in ruins. After the war, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It placed heavy penalties on Germany, including territorial losses and financial reparations. These harsh terms created resentment and would later contribute to future conflict. World War I also led to the collapse of several empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, German, and Russian empires. New countries were formed, and borders were redrawn. One important aspect of the war was the role of propaganda. Governments used posters, newspapers, and speeches to encourage people to support the war. They promoted patriotism and often portrayed the enemy in a negative way to maintain morale at home. Another key factor was the economic strain caused by the war. Countries had to produce massive amounts of weapons, ammunition, and supplies. This led to the development of what is known as a total war economy, where entire societies were focused on supporting the war effort. Colonies also played a significant role. Soldiers from Africa, India, and other parts of the world were recruited to fight for European empires. These contributions are often overlooked, but were crucial to sustaining the war. The war at sea was also very important. Germany used submarines, known as U-boats, to attack Allied ships. This included both military and civilian vessels. These attacks disrupted supply lines and contributed to the United States entering the war. Air warfare was another new development. Airplanes were used for reconnaissance at first, but later they were equipped with weapons and used in combat. This marked the beginning of modern air forces. Medical advancements were accelerated during the war. Doctors developed new techniques to treat injuries, including surgeries and the use of antiseptics. However, the scale of casualties was overwhelming, and many soldiers suffered long-term physical and psychological effects. A condition known as shell shock, now understood as post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), affected many soldiers. It showed the severe mental impact of constant warfare and life in the trenches. Another important front was the Eastern Front, where fighting between Germany and Russia was more mobile compared to the trench warfare in the West. Large territories changed hands multiple times during the war. The war also had a strong impact on civilians. Bombings, food shortages, and economic hardship affected daily life. In some regions, entire populations were displaced. Toward the end of the war, morale in many countries began to collapse. Soldiers were exhausted, economies were weakened, and people demanded peace. This pressure contributed to the eventual end of the conflict. The aftermath of the war reshaped global politics. New ideologies began to emerge, and many countries experienced political instability. These conditions would later contribute to the start of another global conflict. The war changed society as well. Women took on new roles in factories and workplaces while men were fighting. This contributed to future movements for women's rights. World War I marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new, uncertain world. It showed how quickly conflict could spread and how destructive modern warfare had become.